Have you ever been
So lost.
that you don't know?
Which way is up?
Yeah, that's all the time.
out there all alone?
No one to turn to.
No idea where to go.
Lost and alone.
Without a map.
All you have to do is follow the compass.
It'll point you true north.
North. North. Which way is north?
Compass points you north.
It will lead you to the truth. What's truth? What is truth?
Truth.
That's true north.
Well, good morning. It is good to see you guys. I have been on a screen pre-recorded the last several weeks, so bear with me as I remember how to speak to people in person. It's going to take me a second, okay? We're starting a new series today called True North, and before we jump into it, I want to let you know about something that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So this is for men. We're having a men's night, a men's event. It is a men's bowling night. It's going to be a chaparral bowling, which is right down the road. Okay, 7 of you are very excited about that. So that's happening October 18th from 6:30 to 9 p.m. I'm excited about it. We have enough spots for 52 people. We've already had quite a few people sign up. If you're interested in doing this, you should probably sign up now. We'd really love for you to be there. You can grab either the QR code here on the screen or on the chair back in front of you. There's a QR code as well that will take you to a list of several things that are happening. This is one of them. We're doing several things with men over the course of this next year. This is kind of our first thing, and we would absolutely love for you to be there. And if you don't know some of the other guys in this church, we have some really awesome guys in this church. We have some other guys as well, but they are not coming to this. So you'll meet just the cool ones. They'll be awesome. I'll be there. Our pastor of adult discipleship, Kenny Baker, will be there. You don't have to be great at bowling to be there. Kenny is not. So you'll really enjoy that. I don't know. I have no idea how good Kenny is. But hopefully you'll come and hang out with us and get to know us a little bit. We'd love to get to know you a little bit better. October 18th, 6:30 to 9 p.m. That's coming up. We're starting today a new series we're going to be doing for the next 3 weeks, so this week and 2 more Sundays, called True North. I want to start today by just kind of like defining what it is that we mean when we're using the phrase true north. And lots of you have heard this phrase before, but it's something like this. Understanding what truly matters to you, your passions, beliefs, and purpose, and using that understanding as a guide to navigate life. So your true north is whatever you feel like is kind of the irreducible minimum, the lens through which you see everything else. It is the center of your life that you're going to orient everything else around. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about true north. Now, unfortunately, finding our true north, figuring out what that is, has been made far more complicated than it used to be, and it's mostly the fault of the Cheesecake Factory. And the reason I say, how many of you have been to the Cheesecake Factory before? Yeah, that's a lot of people. How many of you really like the Cheesecake Factory? That's a lot less than raise your hand the first. Okay, so Cheesecake Factory, if you've been before, you know that their menu kind of is the same size as like a large family Bible. Okay, it's very big. It's got over 20 pages and over 250 items in this menu. It's like whoever designed this menu woke up hungry for everything, and they just created a menu to go along with it, all right? And so there are some items in it that are pretty good. There are some items in it that are pretty mid, and there are some items in it that are just not very good. But thankfully, they charge the same fairly high price for all of it, regardless of whether it's good or not. That's the Cheesecake Factory, and I think the Cheesecake Factory is kind of a perfect amalgamation of the culture that we live in, because our highest value a lot of times in this culture is freedom and choice and options. And the Cheesecake Factory just turned that into a restaurant menu. We're just going to give you all of the options. You can order almost anything you could think of. We have it on the menu. The challenge with that is that while we have a ton of options in our culture and we have a ton of options at the Cheesecake Factory, we know from psychological studies that this is true. The more options someone has, the less satisfied they are with the one they choose. We know that's true. The more options someone has, the less satisfied they are with the one they choose. They did an experiment a number of years ago where they took 2 groups and they offered both groups that they were going to test they were going to do a tasting of different chocolates. So one group, they had them taste 5 different chocolates, and the other group, they had them taste 40 different chocolates. Okay, so 5 chocolates versus 40 chocolates. At the end of it, for helping out, they gave them each a box of whatever chocolate they wanted from the different chocolates that they had tasted. And what they found was that those who had tasted only 5 chocolates were way happier with the decision they made on which one to get a box of than those who had tasted 40, because this is just true. The more options we have, the less satisfied we are with the ones that we make. And we live in a culture where we have endless options, endless choices for everything all the time. So trying to figure out what your true north is, your irreducible minimum, it's made almost impossible by the culture that we live in, because we're always looking for, yeah, but what if it's this? What if it's this other thing? What if it's this? I still haven't tried this thing over here, and we're doing it constantly. A few examples of this. For instance, it used to be that dating you would, to date or to marry someone, you would find someone in your social circle, right? I mean, we're just talking 50 years ago. You would generally date or marry someone in the town that you grew up in, or that went to the same school as you, or the same college you went to, or that attended your church, or that was a part of your social club. Like, that was your options. You might have a few hundred options of people to date, maybe even over 1,000 if you went to kind of a larger high school. But it was pretty limited. And then a few years ago, dating apps came along, and now there was like an endless amount of options. And so now you can swipe right and end up going on a date with somebody and really enjoy the date. Lots of things about it go really well, but then you get home and you start to think, yeah, but I wonder if there's somebody better, right? Like, that was pretty good. That was a solid 7, but maybe the 10 is just right around the corner. Maybe the 10 is just the very next swipe right. And that is my 10. So we're constantly looking for more and more options, but that leaves us less satisfied with the ones we actually select, and that's certainly true when it comes with dating. If you're married or you're a little bit older and you don't use dating apps, then for you, the equivalent to that might be DoorDash, right? You can just scroll that just like you would Tinder and just find out a taxi for your burrito straight to your door, okay? And it's just like, it's just so many options, so many choices. What is it that I'm going to order? Or music. Some of you who are younger won't believe this, but used to, we had like iPods, MP3 players, okay? Before that, we had the Discman. And before that, we had the Walkman, and nothing before that. That's where history started. History started with the Walkman. And so you could used to, not that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, you could grab somebody's iPod and scroll through their playlist to see what they'd added, because they had to manually add every song that was on there. So they either had to buy it from iTunes, or they had to take, we used to have these little things called CD players, okay? And it was a little disc, and the music was on the disc, and you would stick it in, you could rip the disc onto your hard drive and then put it onto your iPod. And so every song on somebody's iPod was lovingly placed on there or purchased individually from the iTunes store, which means you could grab their iPod, look through their playlist, and immediately have enough information to judge whether they are cool or not, right? It was a super helpful shortcut. You just scroll through, you're like, oh, Nickelback, you are not worth hanging out with, right? You just hand it back, and you just go. So that was very helpful. But nowadays, that's not the way that music works. What's on our phones now? Everything. All of it. Which song would you like to listen to? Anyone, because you have the entire music catalog of basically all of human history almost on your phone at all times. Most of it subscribed and pay good money every month to either Apple Music or Spotify or Pandora or something else. And so everything is on there all the time. And honestly, it kind of makes downloading that new album like less satisfying than it used to. When everything's at your disposal, nothing brings as much satisfaction as it once did. We have limitless options. Last week, I had the boys, my sons, Jack and William, I had them watch Ocean's 11 with me one night. They had never seen it before, and so we pulled it up on, I think, Apple TV and watched Ocean's 11, and one of them even stayed awake for the whole thing. And we had a really fun time with it, and we ate popcorn, had a big party. The next day, it occurred to me that I'm not sure if they know what it was like to try to pick out a movie when I was a kid. So I just asked them in the car, I was like, boys, we just pulled up a movie last night on Apple TV and watched it. Do you know what I used to have to do when I was a kid in order to watch a movie? And they're like, oh, I assume you just like pulled it up on the TV and just press play. I was like, no. We had to leave our home. We had to drive somewhere to a store called Blockbuster Video. And we would walk inside, and wall to wall with just VHS tapes at one point, and later DVD cases. And I was like, this is when I was a kid, when I was my son Will's age, 8 years old, there was no internet, right? So you couldn't look up on RottenTomatoes.com. You didn't have a Letterboxd app to see what was worth watching. You just walked in and just blindly picked out a video based on the cover and hoping that the blurb on the back wasn't a lie, okay? That was all you could do. And so you go in, you felt like limitless options, but it really wasn't. It was a few hundred videos that you could choose from, and you would look for as long as you could, and then eventually your mom would call out, okay, 5 minutes, and we are leaving. Pick it out now, okay? So then you would go and you would do it, and you check it out, and you went home. And if that movie was bad, and even in the first 10 minutes it was bad, you just finished it. Because like that was the one we picked out for today, okay? And then Jack said, so you just got to keep it after that. I was like, no, you had to return it. You drive all the way back. And he was like, what happens if you didn't return? I was like, they would charge you like a library fee, like a late fee, or if you kept it long enough, they'd charge you like $100 because that's what a VHS tape used to cost. Minds were blown this week, guys. It was just, they just never had heard of it. And yet, is our current system a lot better? I realize it's a lot more convenient, But used to, you'd walk into one of these stores, you had limited options, you had to pick one and take it home, and it felt special when you got home with the chosen one, right? This is the movie we're gonna watch. Now you can, at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, sit down with your spouse, your partner, your kids, and you can decide you're gonna pick out a movie, and you can spend the next 3 hours scrolling through all the possibilities, watching trailers, and finally being like, it is 12:30, we have to go to bed now. Is that better? Turns out the more options you have, the less satisfied you are with the one you make. And we see this over and over and over again. In fact, we have so many options, and we're trying to pick our true north, the center of our lives, the thing to hang everything else from. And here's what I've noted in the literature, in every article you see just about online, about mental health or anything else, about the United States and this culture right now with all of these options, here's the reality. We are overwhelmed. It's too much. It's too much, and we're constantly trying to figure out what we should watch and what we should listen to and who we should date and who we should marry and what we should put at the center of our lives and what our true north is. And it is exhausting, which brings me to a question, like, what is your true north? What is it? If you had to say, like, this is the irreducible minimum, this is the center of my life, this is what everything else gets oriented around, what is that for you? I grew up in a home with two Christian parents. In fact, my dad wasn't just a Christian, he was an evangelist, which means his job was traveling all over the United States and talking to people about Jesus. And so that means, for me, my family was at church every Sunday. In fact, I was at church every Sunday since 9 months before I was born. That's how often I was at church. I was there all the time. And I remember getting to college and meeting some other people that weren't Christians, didn't go to church, didn't even know how church really worked, and talking to them about this. And they were being like, you were at church every Sunday? And I was like, yeah, every Sunday. They were like, they have church every single Sunday? Like, some of them didn't know that. Some of you don't know that either. We have church every single Sunday. You could come every week. We're here. We'll be right here. So for some people that was like mind-blowing. For me, it was just what we did. That was just normal for me. And as a kid, I was handed a version of Christianity that was fit for a child. That's the only version a child can hold on to. And so I was given a childlike version of Christianity. And it was very simple, but it was very profound. And this is the childlike version of Christianity I was given. That God loves us a ton. He loves us so much, more than we can possibly imagine. And yet, very early on in our lives, we start to turn our back on him. And there's a brokenness that happens within us. And even as a kid, I understood, yeah, I don't always get along with my brother. I don't always do the best thing with my friends. I don't always obey my parents. Sometimes I'm a problem at school. Like, I understood there's a bit of a brokenness. I throw a wrench into the system sometimes, usually because of my own desires, my own selfishness, my lack of sharing, any of that kind of stuff. So even as a kid, I was like, oh, no, I get that. As an adult, I super get it. Like, yeah, I can look back and see a bunch of decisions, a bunch of regrets that I have, a bunch of things that I wish I would have done differently at the time. So even as a kid, I understood that. And so the idea was like, okay, there is this brokenness in your life, and God was not content to leave you in your brokenness. And he knew that the only way to fix what's broken inside of you was to get you back in right relationship with him. And there's nothing you could do in order to make that happen. So he sent his one and only son, Jesus Christ. And Jesus came and lived amongst us. And in doing so, he showed us what God was like. And he healed a broken world. When he was healing people, what he was really doing was setting the world right again and showing us what it looked like to do that. And then he was killed. And when he was killed, he took upon his shoulders all of my brokenness and all of my sin and all of the ways that I had thrown a wrench in things and made a mess of things. He took it all on himself. And he let it be crucified on the cross when he was killed. And then 3 days later, he rose from the dead. And in doing so he broke the bonds of the brokenness that had been holding me back. And if I would put my trust in him, then I could finally have peace with God, that we could be right with one another, a restored, beautiful relationship. That was the version of Christianity I was handed as a kid. And it was simple. And I was handed other stuff as well, right? And that was helpful to understand. There was other stuff that I was handed not explicitly, but implicitly. Not necessarily by my parents, but in the small church in East Texas that I grew up in, within that church, no one ever said this out loud, but I caught on pretty early, there was a high skepticism about science. There was a belief that somehow science and faith were at odds with one another. And so if you liked science, you probably didn't care about your faith enough. No one ever said that out loud. That's what I could tell that was true. There was also a high skepticism about education and about reading, higher like philosophy or books that might ever contradict the faith that they had handed me. So I kind of understood that was the deal. But that was okay because I was with Jesus and Jesus was great and I had a childlike version of faith and it was wonderful. I turned 18. In the year 2000, I went to college. And within a few months, 3 major things happened. I had a really good friend of mine who was also a follower of Jesus who was killed tragically in a car accident, shortly before we graduated my senior year. A few months into my freshman year in college, another friend of mine was killed in a car accident and passed away. And about 8 months after that, September 11th, 2001, I sat in my sophomore dorm room and watched the Twin Towers in New York City get struck by airplanes, and what we would figure out eventually was a terrorist attack that killed about 3,000 people here in the United States. Now, at this age, I look back and I recognize that there are lots of cultures around the world that had to deal with terrorist attacks and death of people they knew close to them that was just part of the air that they breathed. But for me, at that age, at that time here in the US, that was completely foreign. I wasn't prepared for it. And I realized at the time, looking back at least, I realized that one of the things I believed about God in my childlike Christian faith was that I believed that a defining characteristic of God is that he protected those who were faithful to him. No one ever told me that, by the way. No one said that to me. But I got the feeling, reading through the scriptures, I thought, but really what I heard other people say mostly, that God would protect those who were faithful to him. And then my friends died, and then the towers were hit, and then it just threw my whole world into chaos. So I started to question everything. And I started to think that that faith I was handed, it must not actually be real. And so I started to walk away from Christianity. And that had been my true north. And so I was like, well, okay, what is it now? What's the thing to center on? I started taking classes in college, scandalous if you grew up in the church I grew up in. I started to take science classes, double scandal. And so I started to learn about cosmology and the way that the universe was created. And it was at odds with some of the things I'd been told about a creation account, but it was fascinating. And it was lighting me up. I was so excited about it. I started to just for fun, read books by Stephen Hawking and a book called why does E equal MC squared, and what does that mean? And I was finding this stuff interesting. I started to look at quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And it's not that I understood the math behind any of this. I was never great at math. It's one of the reasons I married the woman I did. She's very good at it. But I loved the theory behind it. And I loved what I thought it taught me about the universe and how things work. And I was fascinated with it. And so I thought for a while, maybe science is true north. It's what I can see, it's what I can test, it's what I can read about, it's what I can learn about. It's either objective, these hypotheses, they're either objectively true or they're not. I really loved the logic of it. I found that to be very, very helpful. But the more I read about it, the more I realized that those who believed in a world totally apart from God, they still believed in an intelligent universe, a universe that could basically be understood through math. And one of the beliefs I found over and over and over again was a belief in total determinism. This idea that you, me, the whole universe, basically just governed by mathematical equations. And therefore, whatever you do in life is whatever you were going to do in life. You are a walking math equation. And however you respond to someone else or to whatever you encounter in life, that's just how you would always respond to that. It was predetermined because you're just a walking math equation and your responses are just natural responses to whatever input your system receives. I realized that that's where science ultimately led, and that meant no free will, no choice. There's no creativity to build a better world than the one that we have now. It either happened naturally because of math or it won't. And I just found that as much as I found science so helpful and so good, and I still read science articles. I love this stuff. I found it made a very poor true north, made a very poor center, because I don't know you completely, but I do know this about you. You will not spend your whole life chasing math. But you will spend your whole life chasing love. And as great as science was, it just didn't fill that part, that need, that desire that I had. So then I also started taking some philosophy classes. I thought philosophy was amazing and super helpful. And at first, I thought it was weird. Everything seemed way out in left field. Why are we talking about this? Why is anyone asking these questions? That seems crazy. But as I started getting some friends in the philosophy classes I was taking, we would then debate philosophy over chicken sandwiches in the cafeteria. And then it seemed very helpful and very real. And so we had these long philosophical discussions. And the more philosophers I studied, both classical and modern, I found out after a while that many of these philosophers were miserable. So as brilliant as they were, as smart as they were, as great as the questions were that they were asking, putting philosophy as true north didn't seem to be working out that well for lots of the brilliant people I was reading. And so I thought, okay, maybe it's not that. Maybe then I thought it's religion. At the time I was thinking, look, I grew up in East Texas. I grew up in a particular religious tradition, of course. In East Texas, I was raised by Christian parents because of the time and the place. And so I became a Christian as a kid because that's the faith I was handed. If I'd been born in India, I would have probably had a totally different faith. If I'd been born in China, I would have had a totally different faith or lack of faith. I thought, okay, my religious tradition was basically circumstantial. And so maybe I need to study some other religions. And some of the philosophers I had read had told me that all religions are basically the same, that they all just point to something that lives beyond us, a greater thing than us, that all religions are the same. Then I started studying all these other religions, and I found out that any philosopher that says that all religions are the same is a philosopher who hasn't read many other religious traditions, because religions are not the same. Religions teach different and often contradictory belief systems. They're just not all the same. And if you were to say to a Muslim that Islam is basically the same as Buddhism, that would be offensive both to the Muslim and to the Buddhist. They are not the same. They're not the same. And in addition to that, I found out that I think some religious traditions are generally better for the world than others. For instance, there's religious traditions from hundreds of years ago where they threw a virgin into a volcano to appease the gods. And look, I don't want to offend anybody this morning, but I don't think that's a great religion. I think that's a bad religious tradition. We should not continue that. And so as I was studying these things, I started to realize, okay, what are the things that these religious traditions have in common? And a couple of things kind of stood out for me. One was that in lots of places, not all, but in lots of places, religion had largely been used to keep the people in line or to give them hope if they didn't have much of it. And so religion kind of functioned in that way. Another thing that a lot of them had in mind is that everywhere, pretty much every society, there are people dealing with guilt and shame, feelings of guilt, feelings of shame, feelings of not living up to whatever, your place in the tribe, your place in society, or in the United States or more Western societies, like the full potential you hope that you can one day grow into. And so because of these feelings of guilt and shame, there are these constructs built so that people can say, look, if you follow these rules, if you do these things, then you will be right with God. You can achieve enlightenment, if that's nirvana, if you want to head toward that, or you can have peace with Yahweh, or you can have peace with Allah. Here's the steps that you have to do. So I studied all these religious traditions, and it was in studying in science and philosophy and all these religious traditions that I actually, after years of doing this, came back to Jesus and realized that he was so incredibly unique compared to the other religious traditions that I was studying, that I found something far more compelling about the way he was inviting me to live than all these other possibilities. And it was only after looking at all these other things that I became convinced that Jesus is Lord. And what I want to do is I want to spend the last few remaining minutes that we have together trying to help you understand why I became convinced of this, that Jesus is Lord, and inviting you to possibly use this as your true north. Here at Verve City Church, we have 10 theological statements that kind of serve as the bedrock here for what we believe and how we believe. And so this series, True North, is about those 10 statements. We're going to do the first 3 statements over the first 3 weeks, and we'll come back to this series sometime in the future and do the other 7. You can pick out a packet out in the lobby that I'll show you here in just a few minutes if you want to know what all 10 are. We're not trying to hide the other 7. But we're just going to spend the first 3 weeks talking about the first 3, and here's the first one. This is the foundational bedrock statement for our entire church that we believe, I'm convinced that Jesus is Lord. And I just want to give you a few reasons this morning that I became convinced of this. Before I continue, I just want to ask, is there any married couple here that's been married for less than 5 years? Can you just raise your hands? You guys back there? That's great. Would you two be willing to help me in just a minute? I need both of you, though. I appreciate that you're excited. Can you come too? Yes, well, okay, that's great, both of you. And you're happy with each other right now? I should have said that beforehand. You're okay with it? I got a thumbs up and I'll take it because it didn't have a lot of other options. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to come forward, okay? All right, we're going to start today in the book of John in chapter 14. I want to look at something that Jesus said that I think is really important. And so this is what he says in John 14. He's speaking to his disciples. These are the 12 people he's called out, and he says to them this: don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. In other words, Jesus is saying hey, you're feeling overwhelmed. Hey, you're feeling anxiety. Hey, you're feeling like there's just so much flying at you. And because you're feeling all that, I just want to tell you that you get to stop it. Which is something that many of us long to hear. You're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling anxious. You're feeling like you're not sure what choice to make. Jesus is saying, you don't have to live like that anymore. Trust in God, he says. Trust also in me. And then he goes on to say something very important. I'm going to have the two of you start making your way up here. You're going to come up these stairs and join me here on the platform, okay? This is what he says in the next verse. There is more than enough room, he says, in my Father's house. And if this were not so, but I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. He goes on and says this. And when everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am, and you know the way to where I am going. So this is what Jesus tells his disciples when he gets the feeling that they are overwhelmed and that they're not sure what to do next. Go ahead and come on into the light. If you'll kind of step up here toward this like pink tape right there. Great. And I want you to face each other like you would have on your wedding day. Okay. What are your names?
Missy.
Missy? Steve. Steve. It's good to see you guys. How long have you guys been married?
2 years.
2 years. Good. You both said the same number. That's great. All right. Missy, does that look like normal water to you in the picture there?
Very
normal
normal.
water? Does it look normal to you? Okay. Do you think I can pour this in here and it can become red wine?
Yeah.
You think I can?
Go to church.
Well, that's crazy. I cannot. Okay, so Jesus could do it. I'm not so good. Okay, so, all right, so we're going to pretend that this is a Cabernet, though, okay? So here's what I'm going to have you do. Go ahead and drop each other's hands for now. I'm going to have you hold that real fast, and I want to talk to you both about first century Jewish weddings, which is what I know you came to learn about today, okay? So you can just look longingly into one another's eyes while I kind of like help them understand a thing, okay? So in the first century, when people would decide to be married, the way that that would work is that Missy's dad and Steve's dad would have gotten together beforehand, and they would have decided upon the price that Steve's dad would pay for him to be able to marry Missy. It was a patriarchal society. It was 2,000 years ago. Let's not judge too harshly, okay? So they would get together and decide on that. And then here's the next thing that would happen. Once they decided that, they would have a big celebration. And everyone that Missy and Steve were friends with would come and gather around. And at this celebration, Steve would take a glass of wine, and he would offer it to Missy. But here's the thing. Missy does not have to accept the glass of wine. She can reject it and therefore reject his proposal of marriage. Now, everybody Steve knows is there. There's a lot of pressure on Steve, okay? So when he hands the wine to her, she can decide to accept or to reject. So, Missy, go ahead and accept it. Let's pretend you're good with this.
I was thinking.
Yeah, I know. It's a hard decision sometimes. So all right, so she accepts the wine. What would happen is that Steve would make a kind of prepared speech. But after his speech is over, they're not married. In fact, they're not even going to get married that night because something has to happen before they can get married, or rather, something has to be built. So in the first century, what Steve has to do is go and build a new home for Missy. And this will be their very first home together. And what he'll do is he will add the new home, the new room that they'll be in, onto the home of his father's house. So he'll come back to where his parents live, and he'll add an extra room onto that house. Now, if Steve has brothers and they've gotten married, there may be a number of rooms that have already been added onto this house, and it's a pretty large dwelling at that point called an insula in the first century. And Steve doesn't get to decide when the house is finished. Your dad gets to decide. Aren't you glad we don't live in the first century? Yeah. All right, so you would go out, you would work on it every day, and eventually Steve's dad would come out and say, good job, or hey, you missed a spot, or whatever, right? And he would eventually tell you, like, okay, you're good to go. Now, while he's been working on the house, Missy would be at home with her mom, and her mom would be teaching her what it's like to run a household. So how to cook and clean, how to care for the children, how to call Verizon and complain that the phone bill's not right, all the important things that one has to learn, okay? And every night, in anticipation that Steve will at some point come and let her know that the work has been completed, she will put an oil lamp in her window. So the day finally comes. Steve finishes up the room. His dad comes and says, good job, son, or whatever they said. And that was ancient Hebrew. Maybe you didn't catch it. All right, so he says that. And so then Steve has to go to Missy's house, and he brings all of his friends and all of his family, and they go to Missy's window where he sees the oil lamp, and she comes out, and they have a big, giant processional back to the house so that she can see the good work, hopefully, that Steve has done on the home. And then a few days or weeks later, the actual wedding would take place, and finally they would be married. But before all of that, way back at the very first celebration together, when Steve is still holding the cup and then he extends it to Missy and she takes it, he makes a prepared speech. And it was the same speech at every one of these celebrations. Once the future bride took the cup, every Jewish boy had to memorize it. And here's what the speech sounded like. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And when everything is ready, I will come and get you, so that you will always be with me where I am, and you know the way to where I am going. When the first disciples heard this, they didn't just hear some kind of future promise of heaven. What they heard was that Jesus wanted to have such intense relationship with them, they would almost be as if they were married. Thank you both for your time. I appreciate it. Steve and Missy, everybody.
I thought you were going to have me drink it.
No, who knows what's in here? This is what Jesus is saying to his disciples. Like, this is the kind of relationship we're going to have together. And he ends with this, you know the way to where I'm going. Now, Jesus spoke a lot in metaphors and parables and idioms, but Jesus' disciples were idiots. And so often they didn't understand the symbolic nature of what he was saying. And so Thomas here, he said, you know the way to where I'm going. And Thomas says, no, we don't know, Lord. We have no idea where you're going. So how can we know the way? I love Thomas. I am Thomas. This next verse, Jesus' response to Thomas, I think is one of the most important passages of Scripture in all of the Bible, because whether you believe this or not will absolutely determine the trajectory of the rest of your life. This is how Jesus responds. Jesus told him, I am the way. We don't know the way. I am the way. I am the truth. And I am the life. And no one can come to the Father, Jesus says, except through me. 20 plus years of pastoring. Here's what I've learned. People don't spend their whole life looking for God. People spend their lives looking for life and joy and purpose and happiness. And we live in a culture that gives us a billion different options for what that can look like. It's science and philosophy and religion and money and wealth and power and fame and sex. It's all these things. And you will have tons of voices speaking into your life, whether from people that you know directly talking to you or advertisements that you see in between episodes of Yellowstone. People telling you exactly what you should make your true north so that you will finally find life. And Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. If you want life, Jesus says, you have to find it here, in him. Now, there's a certain way to understand this, that we think that Jesus is saying, oh, I'm so exclusive that you can't try anyone else, right? I'm so jealous that you might go to another religious tradition or try to find another rabbi or whatever. You just got to stick with me. But this is not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is not saying I'm so exclusive you can't try anyone else. Jesus is saying this. You want life. You want joy. You want contentment. You want purpose. I'm here and no one else is coming. It's in me. If you're looking for the way and the truth and the life, Jesus says, look no further. After he says this to them, Philip, another one of his disciples, says, Jesus, just show us the Father and we'll be happy. And Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He's the exact representation of the Father. If we wanted to know what God was like, Jesus came to answer that question once and for all. If you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father. There's not more information above him or below him or to the left of him or to the right of him. If you've seen Jesus, he says, you have seen the Father. We keep looking for God, looking for contentment, looking for our true north in every other place. And Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. And if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. October is always the start of one of the most challenging couple of months every single year for me. October is tough because every year they put that corn maze and those carnival rides over there. And when I bring my kids to church, they beg me to go to it every single time. I don't know if you've looked at those rides over there. I'm pretty sure 1 out of 10 customers dies. I'm pretty sure that's true. In 2019, we moved to Southern California and we took our kids to Disneyland. They loved it. They lost their minds. So we bought season passes. And then, as a cruel joke, Disneyland decided in 2020 to just shut down the whole year. And so we couldn't use our passes. In 2021, we could buy passes again, but they had figured out that they could charge us, 10, 20 times more than they did before. So at first we bought we bought one of the top passes, one of the top 2 passes, and every year since then we've lowered the pass a little bit. And depending on how much you pay, you have more blackout dates. The lower you go, there's more blackout dates. We are now at the lowest tier. I think we can go to Disneyland Tuesdays between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. It's kind of our window. And we do. But I thought when we moved here, like, okay, this is awesome. Like, my kids get to experience something. Like, if you're looking for a great amusement park, if you're looking for a land of imagination, like, you're not going to do better than a Disney property. And so I thought, man, we live so close. It's really cool that we live here. I want them to grow up. They're at a great age for this, like, enjoying this kind of thing. And so we bought the passes, and we gave them to them. They were so excited, and we just continue to buy them. And so they have access to some of the greatest theme park experiences in the entire world. And every October, they want to go to Death by Corn Maze. Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. If you are looking for life, if you're looking for truth, if you're looking for the way, if you're looking for true north, look no further. There's no one else coming. It's me. It's me. And we spend all of our life looking everywhere else, trying to find it somewhere else. And Jesus just wants us to hear, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, you've seen the Creator, which you were created for relationship with, and look no further. Now, here's what I know about you, right? You're awesome, right? And I know a lot of you are thinking, like, I am awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, you're awesome when you're alone, okay? You're awesome when you're alone. You're the most patient person in the world as long as you're not close to anybody else, okay? You're the most generous person in the world as long as nobody needs anything from you. You always tell the truth as long as no one needs you to, okay? That's it. You're awesome when you're alone. But here's, like, if you want to know how your soul is doing, if you want to ask, like, is true north aligned in the way that it should be, here's a great, helpful practice you can do. If you want to know how your soul is doing, ask yourself, how healthy are the relationships in your life? How healthy are the relationships in your life? Because what you're cultivating in your interior life will be reflected in what you are creating in your exterior world. And the kinds of relationships you have and the quality of them. Are you finding yourself constantly sucked into drama? Are you always upset? Are you always fearful? Are you always angry? Are you always mad? Is it always somebody else's fault that you were misunderstood? Again, like, what does your exterior world look like? Because that is usually a great reflection of what is happening in your soul. You're awesome. I'm awesome. We are awesome when we're alone. And Jesus came as the way and the truth and the life, that we can be transformed into the kind of person that looks increasingly like him. And if you find yourself anxious and overwhelmed by the options, anxious and overwhelmed by the dishealth, dissatisfaction of the relationships in your life, there is a way and a truth and a life that you're invited into. If you've seen me, Jesus says, you have seen the Father. What I discovered in my 20s, as I was trying to figure out my true north, is that what Christianity is, this way of Jesus, this following after Jesus, it really can't even be called a religion, because religion is about achieving some type of preferred state by checking boxes and doing something to earn it. But Jesus didn't show us the steps toward God. He showed God stepping toward us. It's totally different. And he told us that he loved us so much that the kind of relationship he longs for us to have with him is like that of a marriage, a wedding relationship. That amount of intimacy, that amount of support, that's what he invites us into. Our pastor, Earl McManus, said one time that he thinks every one of us is born a philosopher, because by the time we get to the age of 3, we're asking the same question over and over and over again. Why? Why? Why, Dad? Why, Mama? Why? I personally really enjoy hanging out with first-time parents of young children, because their children start to ask why, and these parents, they think that if they just explain it, the kid will stop asking. It's hilarious. It's adorable is what it is. Why moms, they just get down on their level, they try to talk to them like they're adults, and it never works. Just why, right? Now we get a little bit older, we get a little more sophisticated, and we start to ask other questions like what and where and when and who, right? But I think we get to the end of our life and we become philosophers and we ask the question, why again? Why this life? Why this purpose? Why this health or unhealth, unity or disunity in my relationships? Why? Why Jesus? And if you're looking for life, and if you're looking for purpose, and if you're looking for joy, that is why. He is the way and the truth and the life. And I am convinced that once you see him, you will see the Father, the Creator for which you were designed for relationship with, who is inviting you through Jesus, who stepped toward us to come home. It doesn't mean all of life gets easy after that. It just means that there is a hollowness in you that I fear will always be empty if you don't follow Jesus and make him your Lord, which is the boss of your life. Look, this is anathema to an American mindset because we're always saying well, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I don't want to limit any of my options. I don't want to limit any of my freedom. And I just want you to know that freedom is found on the other side of self-limitation in the way of Jesus. You think you're free now because you have all the options in the world, you think, but you are less satisfied with the ones you will choose when all of them are available to you. It is through the way and the truth and the life, the way of Jesus, choosing to live your life in the way of Jesus, that you will find true freedom, true joy, true life. That's what I am convinced of. Last Monday, my kids were out of school. I don't know why, just sometimes they're just don't send your kids to school today. It's oh. Okay, I guess we got to figure out something else to do. So I took the day off work, and I asked my kids what they wanted to do, and they wanted to go to Dave & Buster's because they like to see how fast we can spend $500. And so we decided we would go there, and before we went to Dave & Buster's, I was like, what do you guys want to do for lunch? And they were like, oh, Dad, we want to eat at a fancy restaurant. I was like, oh, okay, I'm listening. What kind of fancy restaurant? Because, most fancy restaurants have kids' menus, so that it's not that expensive, but Dad could eat a really nice steak lunch is what I was thinking. So I was like, oh, fancy restaurant, like Fleming's? Or what do you want to do? And they said, Dad, we want to go to the Rainforest Cafe. Great. Rainforest Cafe and Corn Maze of Death. It's going to be an awesome week, guys. So we go to the Rainforest Cafe, and we notice that there is a large cat on one side of the cafe, and it looks like this. And so my kids, Jack's 11, Will is 8, they can't decide whether this is a leopard or a cheetah, okay? So Jack's convinced it's a leopard because he recently started studying big cats as part of his school curriculum, and he's like, look, I know it's a leopard because of the spots and the particular coloring and the way that the ears are shaped, and they're more round and less pointy and all this thing. But William had recently watched a YouTube video, so he in fact knows everything. And so he said, no, it's definitely a cheetah, Dad, because I saw this cheetah video, and it was awesome, and he talked about the cheetah video for a while. And I'm not taking a side, I'm just trying to play them off of each other because I'm a good dad, and I just like to see them fight. And so they are totally disagreeing with one another, and I'm just getting all kinds of amusement out of this. And then finally the waitress comes over to see if we need drink refills, and I say, hey, settle a debate for us. Is that a leopard or a cheetah? And she looks over her shoulder and looks at the cat, and she turns back around and she says, that is a jaguar. And she just walks away. You can spend your entire life thinking through, debating, trying to determine between a myriad of options, only to find out you never even considered the best one, the real one, the true one. And I'm convinced that some of you this morning need to cross the line of faith, need to make Jesus your Lord. You've been thinking about it, you've been considering it, you've been on the fence. Maybe you've even come to church a bunch, but you just haven't actually done it. And I believe that some of you are going to make that decision this morning. And so here's what I'd love for you to do. I'd love all across the room for every head to be bowed and every eye to be closed. Every head bowed and every eye closed. And I want you to just picture, with your eyes closed, just picture in your mind a line in the sand. And on one side is you, and you're looking at that line. On the other side is Jesus. And he is beckoning you to cross over that line of faith, to actually join him over there where he is the way and the truth and life. He has stepped as far toward you as he possibly can. All you have to do is receive. All you have to do is make the choice to cross that line and to receive the way and the truth and the life from the one who, if you've seen him, you've seen the Father. And so if you've not done that before, but today you recognize that it needs to happen for you, then I'm just going to invite you in just a moment to say a prayer with me. It's very short, one sentence. If you choose to do this, then over the coming days, weeks, months, you and God are going to talk about a lot of things. But today, your starting place is just one sentence, and it's very, very simple. And right where you're sitting, you can just whisper this prayer to yourself if this is what you want to do. If you want to cross that line of faith and go join Jesus, the way, the truth, and life on the other side, here's the sentence. Here it is. It's very simple. You can just whisper it right where you are, right to yourself. Here we go. The prayer is simply this. Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. It's the whole prayer. If you want to cross that line of faith, maybe right where you are, just whisper, Jesus, I give you my life. And what happens in this moment is that you start a journey, you begin a trajectory toward God that can be completely transformative, your true north, your center, around which everything else is oriented. Jesus, I give you my life. With your head still bowed and your eyes still closed, I just want to pray for you. And so I would ask you, if you wouldn't mind, if you just prayed that prayer for the first time, you crossed that line of faith just now. Maybe it's been a long time coming. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's been fairly recently that you found any of this compelling. But if you just crossed that line of faith and you prayed that prayer in your mind or out loud, would you slip your hand up so I can pray for you? Just slip your hand up and you can put it right back down there. Anybody pray that? Thank you. I see hands all over here. Yep, right there. Thank you. Up here. Yes, right there. Anybody else? Yep. Thank you right there. Anybody else? Thank you in the back. I see a couple of hands back there. I see a hand right there. Anybody else? Yep, I see that young man. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you guys. Anybody else? I just prayed that prayer. Josh, can you pray for me? Anybody else? Thank you. I see you guys over here too. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for each and every person that chose to cross the line of faith today, to choose to put their trust in Jesus, to give their life to you. And God, I pray that today you fill them with joy and life and purpose. That today, Father, as their faith increases, their overwhelm will decrease. And I pray, God, that they will know that whatever they face in the future, whether it be joys or challenges, that you love them and you are with them and you long to have a deep relationship with them. So God, I just pray that you fill them with courage and vitality and excitement, enthusiasm for who you are. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, look right back up here. If you just raised your hand, I'm going to invite you to do one more thing. It's a bigger ask than what I just asked. And so I'm going to give you a moment for the butterflies to subside so you can hear what I'm saying again, okay? In the first century, when someone decided to put their trust in Jesus, the first thing they did was to let the community of Jesus know about it. And so in just a few moments, not right this second, but in just a few moments, I'm going to invite you, if you raise your hand and ask me to pray for you, to stand up right here in front of this whole room and to just shout out the sentence, I believe. Just to let everyone know that you've made that decision to put your trust in Jesus today so that you can feel their love and support right here and right now. Because it matters a lot that you took the first step today, that you decided to cross that line of faith. Goodness, good for you. Now with great courage, I'm going to ask you to stand in front of others and announce it to them so that they can know that it happened and so that you can feel their love and support. I promise you, you'll feel butterflies when you stand, but then you're going to feel support and love because this room is going to go nuts as if the Lakers just won the NBA championship, which we're pretty sure is not going to happen this year, but it'd be great if it did. But they are going to be thrilled for you. And you may have walked in here this morning not knowing anybody here with no friends and no family as a part of this church, and you're about to have hundreds of friends and family if you choose to stand right now and just declare, I believe. In the first century, this is what they invited them to do, to take it to the community and let them know. And I want to invite you to do the same thing. So in just a moment, not yet, in just a moment, I'm going to count to 3. And on 3, if you prayed that prayer, if you raised your hand, if I've already prayed for you, I'm just going to invite you to stand up and just declare, just to say out loud, I believe. I believe when I count to 3, okay? So I've tried to give you a moment to get your courage up, All right? So I'm going to start counting now, and we're going to get to 3. And then if you did that and you want this community to be behind you, I want to encourage you to stand. Okay, here we go. 1. Next number is going to be 2. Okay, just so you know. 2. Third number will be 3. Here we go. Get ready. 3. If that's you, just stand up right where you are. Thank you so much. We are proud of you. We are grateful for you. And we are excited for you because crossing the line of faith is a big deal. It's a big deal. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for trusting this community and for trusting Jesus. You guys can have a seat right where you are. Now look, if you stood up just now, here's what I want to ask you to do. We're going to sing a song here in just a moment. After we do that, I'm going to ask you to come right to the stage when we dismiss, and I'll let you know again in a moment. We've got a gift for you. We just want to give you a gift. In 2 weeks, we're going to do baptism here at Verve City Church, okay? That's happening not next Sunday, but the one after that. If you've not been baptized, but you know that is your next step of obedience, you felt supported just now when you stood, right? They go even crazier when you get dunked in the water to show that you really mean this and you are all in, okay? So I just want you to consider coming back and being baptized in a couple of weeks. We're going to send you information about that this week. And so we just invite you to come grab these gifts as our way of saying thank you and for us to give you your next step. Today was your first step. It's not your last. You have days and weeks and months of awesome things to discover about yourself and about God and about what Jesus wants to do with your life. Don't stop now. You're just getting started. Okay, when you came in today, you were given a communion elements, communion or the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper. I want you to take that and open up the bread part first, because if you open the juice first, the only way to get to the bread is to spill it on you or your neighbor. And so I'm going to ask you to open the bread first, and then you can open the juice. And we're going to partake real fast in an ancient ritual that has been practiced by the church since the very first century. On the night that Jesus would be arrested, tried, and crucified, he gathered his disciples, those who had decided to make him their true north, together, and gathered them in an upper room, and he gave these elements of bread and wine to them. And he said that he wanted it to be used as a reminder of what he was about to do, which was to give his life that they might have right relationship with God. And so the church has been partaking of this to remind ourselves of what Jesus did and to remind us of what we're supposed to do, to break ourselves open as he did and pour ourselves out for the good of the world around us, just as he did. They've been doing this for 2,000 years, and we do it today in solidarity and in union with them. Jesus took the bread, and he looked at his disciples and broke it, and he said, "This is my body broken for you. Take and eat in remembrance of me." After that, he took the cup, and he told them that this wine represented his blood that was poured out for the new covenant, the new relationship that God wanted to have for each and every person. Take and drink in remembrance of Jesus. Father, thank you for this family of God. Thank you for this church. Yeah, we're all a family. We have a bunch of new family members today that we're really excited about. We got brothers from other mothers and sisters from different misters, and we are gathered here today at the foot of the cross, worshiping you for what you were willing to do for us. God, thank you. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the way and the truth and the life. Thank you that to see you, you sent your only son so that we could know just how good you are. May our entire life be oriented around him, our true north. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Would you stand together and worship and celebrate with us this morning?